Let's drill down into one of these to get a little bit more insight into the level of detail information we can provide. We can drill down into a trip details, and the trip details is this very nice, very detailed information about that individual trip. So you can see kind of high-level information, who was doing that trip, when was it started, how long did it take, 17 minutes in this case, how far was the trip based on odometers, that was 13 miles, based on GPS, 12 miles, suggested route, I'll show you that in a second. That's another way that we can estimate what the trip might be or should be. And then the reimbursement rate, which got applied to this, and I'll show you how you can change that. In this case, 55.5 cents per mile. Any additional expenses, the total expense. So all this is nice, summarized in this report. But then some of the more fun, exciting, interesting things, the start and the end. When I was the mobile worker and I started the trip, I entered the odometer. It automatically collected the time and the date. In this case, I did take a picture of the odometer, so it shows me the picture. I can zoom in on that to actually read the odometer and see, in fact, it was 20,070 miles, and I can validate that that is, in fact, the correct odometer that was entered for this trip. Likewise, I have the end information of where I was, so the timestamp, the actual address I was when I ended the trip. And again, this was collected automatically. And the end odometer, I can compare that if I want to the image. Going even further, we actually show you a full interactive map of the trip itself. The green icon is where the trip started, and this again was based on the GPS location when I said start trip. The red is where the trip ended, so that was the GPS collection when I ended the trip. The blue dots and the arrows are the actual GPS points that were collected both at the beginning and during the trip. So you can see this is actually the real route that was taken, the individual points. Now the individual points are collected, in this case I was collecting them every 3 minutes. And what we do is we connect the individual points with a straight line to just give you a rough estimate of what the trip looked like. When we talked about the GPS miles calculation, it's calculated by using these straight line segments. So you can see it's not going to be exact, but again, it's going to give you a rough estimate of how far the person traveled, not just from beginning to end, but actually in the route itself. And that way you can compare that to the odometer miles to see if it generally makes sense. You also see this purple line, and what this purple line is actually is the suggested route that comes from Google Maps. So if you plugged in this starting location in green and this red location, the end location, into Google Maps, and you said, show me a route, that's what the purple line is essentially the route from beginning to end that Google would suggest from going from point A to point B. So we display that for a couple different reasons. One is by getting that route, Google tells us how far that expected travel distance is. So again, you can compare that to the actual odometer, and you can compare that to the actual GPS miles. And then you can also see, well, what route did my employee take versus what Google would suggest as a good route.